Introduce the advocacy director of the SBAC, Ryan Tolley, and he's going to give you some updates on some things that we've recently won in our advocacy efforts, and then a couple of things that we're going after that I think you guys will be excited about. Ryan?
Yeah, sure. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight to our SBAC Hyde Park Happy Hour. So as Dwayne said, I do all the legislative work for the Small Business Advocacy Council. So we just kind of got done with our Springfield session. We had a few wins off of that. We got a few bills passed. One will be signing into law at the 1st of August, dealing with a prohibition that doesn't allow for liquor to be sold within 100 feet of a church. What we're doing with that process is moving it from, if you would like an exemption, the church says it's okay, your state rep thinks it's okay. Now, rather than going to a state for that exemption, you can go to city council, which will save business owners so much time, and it can provide for more businesses and local communities across Chicago. Another bill we worked on was allowing for health insurance to cover long-term care for addiction. And this is really important for the small business owner because there's been studies done that show that for an employee who is prescribed an opioid for a work-related accident, their health insurance costs are going to be 8 times as high as someone with the same accident who wasn't prescribed opioids. So this is just a really good bill that can help folks that are struggling with addiction as well as drive down costs for employers. As you guys know, workers' comp costs, health insurance costs are some of the highest for employers. And then the last bill that we worked on was to do regulatory impact analysis for small businesses. So each time the state proposes new rules, regulations, they're supposed to take into account how that's going to impact businesses. We expanded that report so they can take further consideration into that and make a good judgment on if this effect is going to be so adverse that they can change requirements for you to start implementing, or they can omit small businesses from certain requirements. So those are our big 3 things Springfield-wise. Other than that, we got some legislation, some city ordinances that are currently active right now. One bill that we've been working on federally is a bill that would allow employers to pay into their employees' student loan debt. And that money they contribute would be non-taxed. And this is really big for employers who want to become more competitive. As we know, as unemployment rate goes down, the competitiveness for jobs goes up. And so by allowing employers to offer programs like, or incentivizing employers to offer programs like this, I think is a huge win. We all know the student loan debt just continues to increase. And this could be a way to tackle that problem by also making small businesses competitive. If you look now, a lot of larger businesses already offer these programs, and a big reason why is because they can eat those costs. They get taxed on that money that they contribute in. City level, we just got an ordinance introduced to legalize A-frame sandwich board signs. So you see those across the city. They're all currently illegal. So we're trying to make a permitting process to allow small businesses who want to use that inexpensive, very effective marketing tool to do so. But currently, if you see those out, that's up to $500 a day per fine. So that can add up for a while, especially if they're mailing you the fines and you go check your mailbox maybe every 2 weeks. As we had one business owner do, they were sending them to his warehouse and he saw them 3 weeks later. And other than that, we also are launching a pilot program. So I'm sure you guys all know, if you've ever received a violation, you have to go down to administrative hearings. You have to get legal representation, because as a small business, you can't represent yourself, even if you just want to simply pay the fine. So we're starting out with 10 violations where you can prepay by mailing in a check or going and just submitting that at City Hall. That's a big win just because it's saving you time from sitting in administrative hearings, as well as hiring the attorney to go represent you for a $100 to $200 violation that you can easily correct. So that kind of gives you a scope. I guess if you're not familiar with SBAC, we work on a wide range of issues. They're always focused on helping small business owners succeed. We do federal, state, local issues. We have a policy committee that meets once a month. If you're ever interested, you're ever seeing issues that are impacting your business, that's the place to bring them to. I've never worked on an issue that wasn't brought to me by a small business owner. As much as I'd love to have the time to think up all these great ideas and initiatives, there are literally business owners coming to us and saying, hey, here's problems we're seeing. These are things that are impacting my business. And we go to work and represent you guys in Springfield and City Hall.
Give him a hand. Give him a hand. Thank you. Those are some big wins. Those are some very important things. And like he talked about, those ideas coming from our business owners that are either members of the SBAC at large or their policy committee members. But these are not ideas that are coming from the politicians that we're electing in the office. Part of the reason for that is that their job is to really, again, they really work for us. And because of that, if we want something to be enacted, we have to submit it, present it the right way, and then advocate for that so that we can move it across the line and get it done. The SBAC, quite honestly, and I say this modestly, we've gotten more done in the last 6 months in terms of legislative wins than some of our legislators that are dilly-dallying around with all this other stuff. So it's not always about the vote. You didn't vote for Ryan. You didn't vote for me, and you didn't vote for any of the members that go down to Springfield and take that trip on our behalf on a nonpartisan basis, but you didn't vote for them. But they're getting things done. So another round of applause for the SBAC Advocacy Committee. Thank you. And I get actively involved in that. As you know, my name is Dwayne Hirsch. I'm an executive board member with the SBAC, and I'm very proud to sit on that board. And I'm also a real estate agent with Hirsch Network Real Estate powered by eXp Realty. I am hosting, as you'll see up on the board, a series of master classes. A part of what we do at the Hyde Park Happy Hour, my networking journey began with just helping people connect with each other and having events where people can just start to connect, energize, and work with each other to gain benefit. But now it's starting to move, and it's evolving into something where I can start to take the things that I've learned and now teach it to business owners and give you the connectivity you need to build and grow that business through 3 very strategic, if you will, ideas. First, starting with the psychology of entrepreneurship, advancing to business development, and then networking. And those things work together succinctly. And you'll see also some discount specials up there we were offered by friend Otis Clay, who owns Contagious, a new app that you guys definitely got to know about to get discounts on the things that matter. Now, as we advocate for different rule and different law, a part of the benefit of advocacy is knowing ahead of time what somebody is fighting for. How many of you knew that that A-frame sign thing was illegal? You see them at coffee shop, you would, you don't count. You stay informed. But how many, you don't know that that's illegal, right? That's an old, antiquated law that nobody knows about. You got your nice business, they do it up at, I ain't gonna say where we be at, but I've seen them at places that I frequent. And the business owner probably doesn't know. And if they watch that and they go up and they give him a fine, he's gonna have a big problem. So a lot of what you have that is already on the books legislatively is old and it's antiquated. And it's groups like the SBAC and your local chambers of commerce, Hyde Park, and others who really should be working and will continue to be working to help to change that. Now, as a matter of broader issues in the political sphere, there's that old ghost of property taxes, right? Now, property taxes is always a big issue when you live in a city where people are leaving the city. People are leaving the state because on a state level, the tax system is, you know, too high, and people are leaving because they can't get the type of breaks they need to stay. Citizens, homeowners are upset with the way property taxes have been levied, especially with the different reports that came out recently. So there was an election, and a lot of great energy went into that election and everybody getting out to vote for somebody who they felt like was going to change that. So in an effort to keep you on the front of everything, I want to present to you tonight that you're going to meet the man who won the Democratic nomination for Cook County Tax Assessor. And this is very big because in coming behind someone who did so much wrong, who was basically taking your home valuations off Zillow, and there have been studies to show how uneven this system was, he's going to be up under a lot of pressure to make that right. But he's here tonight to talk about that openly. Every time I've met him, he's always been just as calm and kind as can be. And we hope that he stays that way and lives up to the promises once he gets in office. But what we're here tonight for is to make sure that he knows that there are people that are watching, that we're paying attention, and that we're gonna be involved and we're gonna be engaged. Not just as adversaries to point out everything that you do that's gonna be wrong, just to say, hey, can we get an opportunity to come in there and talk about how we feel about that? The interests of a business owner and a homeowner don't always necessarily meet, but they do meet when it comes to property taxes. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Give a round of applause to the Democratic nominee for Cook County Assessor, Fritz Kaegi. Thank you. Come on over here and have a seat. Get in the hot seat, Fritz. Let's go. So now what we're gonna do tonight, we just kind of talk a little bit. We're gonna get to know Fritz, and we're gonna, I'm gonna ask a few questions, and I'm gonna give you guys the floor to ask a few questions as well. So you're from Hyde Park. Tell us a little bit about your humble beginnings here.
Well, I grew up at 53rd and Greenwood in my parents' house, and they still own it. I went to Kenwood Academy. I was in the class of '89, just down the block.
Okay. All right.
And very proud Bronco. I went out.
Clearly no Broncos in the house tonight. All right, go
I
ahead,
know
go
we
ahead,
got some
one.
Dolphins. All right, there we go. We got a Bronco here. It's also good to see other friends here tonight. We got some old ones and some new ones, so we're so glad to have you here. And this is actually the first event we've done in Hyde Park since the election.
Right.
We took some personal time to go on a vacation, reacquaint myself with my family. But I live in Oak Park now with my wife Rebecca and our 3 kids. But Hyde Park, this was a great place to grow up. You know, this made an impact on me because I grew up here in the '80s when this was at the center of the progressive wave in Chicago that brought a lot of really great, good change to a city that needed it. And we continue to benefit from that change, and we're trying to do the same thing to the assessor's office. We can get into all the things that have been done wrong. Now, my background is I was a portfolio manager of a mutual fund, which if you don't know, a mutual fund is how you can save money for your 401k or IRA. People contribute money to it, and then we manage the money invested in stocks. And my job was to value companies around the world and be a steward over people's savings. And that's the kind of background that this office requires, because it's determining your share of the property tax bill, and it needs to be done fairly, without bias, and without corruption, without error, because it can really affect a lot of people's financial fortunes.
Right, so since you kind of segue us into that, your campaign platform. Take a minute or two to talk to us about what it is that you campaigned on and how you see that now that you've kind of gotten past that first hurdle in the primary, how you see that and your ability to make good on those promises that you
Sure.
made.
Well, so our campaign was all about making the assessor's office ethical, transparent, and fair, and it had been none of those things before that. Everyone, you know, you do a campaign like this, and you realize that everyone has a story about the assessor's office, that they might have been in there trying to get help, they might have been in there trying to get an exemption if they're a senior, or they talk about the crazy valuation on their home and how property tax displaced them, or how they had to hire a lawyer that got 1/3 of the savings just to get a just outcome on their property tax bill. You know, we have, and research has shown this, there were some exposés in the Tribune, but showing that the more modest your home, the higher the rate you paid throughout, in every neighborhood of Cook County. But it most impacted places that had black and brown people, that were poorer, that had immigrants, and that were most impacted by the housing crisis. They paid the highest rates, while the most under-assessed parts of the county were downtown corporate properties, not even owned by individuals, but owned by publicly traded corporations, and the wealthiest parts of the city. And it was not fair. This office does not have to work that way. The reason why, the explanation for why this came to be, was that this office had been used as a cash cow for the political machine. That people who practiced before the office as lawyers and as appraisers were the main financial contributors to the assessor, and of course the assessor did favors for them and for their clients by knocking down their assessments. And this was wrong, because who who gets hurt by this system when you're giving big benefits to Trump Tower, to other big owners downtown and clients of insiders who are the lawyers. Well, everyone else, the people who aren't insiders. And our platform was to change this, to not take donations from property tax appeals lawyers who corrupted the system, to make it transparent so that people understand how their property tax bill was being calculated, how their share of the bill came about, open up the numbers, and make it fair. You should, no matter how much your home is worth, everyone should be paying the same rate. This is how it works in the rest of the country. This is how we should do it here. And voters wanted a big change, and that's why they voted for it.
Now, you made mention of something about, what I'm looking to know is, so the homeowner that has been over levied over this time, I want you to kind of explain just a little bit about what that rate is, and just so they understand what the imbalance was.
Right.
I mean, obviously, a person that lives in a home that's valued at $100,000 is not paying more in actual physical dollars than the other person. But talk about the rate and how that affects that.
Well, thanks for asking, Dwayne, because the system can become pretty complex. So here's how it works. The assessor doesn't determine how much your taxes. It doesn't tell you what your taxes are going to be. It doesn't tell us how much property tax is going to be collected. All the different government bodies in Cook County do that. It's $14 billion per year. But what the assessor's office, our job to do is to determine the value of everyone's home, and then that becomes your share of that $14 billion bill. But if we are saying that your home is worth more than it actually is, and meanwhile we're undervaluing other property owners, you are paying more than your fair share. And that has real consequences. Just to break it down, on the south side for average $150,000 home, and so this is not like a luxurious home in a lot of south side neighborhoods. The Tribune study showed that the average person on a $150,000 home on the south side was overpaying by somewhere between $500 and $1,000 per year in property taxes, more than they should have. So that is hundreds of millions of dollars going out of people's pockets on the south side. That should not be. That should be staying in their pockets, paying down debt, taking care of their families, being spent on local businesses, being spent on small businesses like the kinds of businesses that many of you have here. And instead, when they're giving billions of dollars of benefits to corporate property owners downtown, everyone else has to make up the difference. And the south side paying over $300 million a year more than it should because of that system. So our work in deciding how much your home is worth is very important. We need to do it accurately so you don't pay more than your fair share, and we have to make sure that we're not being biased and that there's not a conflict so that insiders are not paying less than their fair share. So that's our job. That's what we're trying to bring about.
And that's another good point that you make. Now, we know about the fact of how the rate is supposed to be charged. Let's talk a minute about valuation. I'm in the real estate business. A lot of my friends, a few agents, and my friend Marco here, who isn't a licensed appraiser now, is here tonight. And so when I know that every time someone is qualifying for a home, and I got to give a shout out to Aubrey Locke, our sponsor, because he's in the mortgage business, and that's what he does. So if someone comes to him and the house that I'm looking to sell them has a tax bill that is overpriced, they may not be able to get that home now because the dollars that you pay in taxes affect your mortgage more heavily than price. So $1,000 in, or let's just say $1,200 to make it even, in property taxes is $100 a month in your mortgage. On the flip side of that, $1,000 in your mortgage is hardly a couple of dollars in terms of your monthly payment. So this issue does affect that. What is the process that you intend to use, or if there's a system that you're legally bound to use for how you value those? Again, we talked about the fact that they have been doing this off Zillow before, which even realtors don't like to use Zillow. You know what I mean? Like, we hate it. So, talk about that. And then if you have any input on that, Marco, based on what you know, I'd like to hear that. But go ahead.
So it's the job of the assessor's office to as accurately as possible, estimate the sale price in the market today for every piece of property in Cook County. And then that becomes your share of the property tax levy. So we need to, our job is to use all the data that's out there. And there's a lot of data. You know this from being in your business. You know, not only do you have transaction data that's available to everyone now, but then you have satellite imagery. You have 3D. You have pictures of everyone's home that's now on the multiple listing service. You have Fannie and Freddie. They have a database of all the appraisals that lenders have given for mortgages that they guarantee throughout the United States. There's so much data out there, and we need to use that. We need to use modern technology to use the same kind of, to provide the same kind of insight that you would if you were selling your home. You know, if you're selling your home or you have a client who's coming to you, you can estimate pretty accurately what it's going to sell for based on the things that you know are important for how things are priced in your neighborhood. That's the job of the assessor's office, to do that same thing so that we're getting it accurately. Because when it's not accurate, that means that some people are paying more than their fair share and others are less. So we got to make it as accurate as possible. And so we use all the data that's out there, and then we use model that takes all that data and then estimates what the sales price is. That is the job of this office in a nutshell.
Okay.
And we just need to do a better job of using that technology and then be a good steward over the system so we don't let it get biased.
Right. So I have a two-part question here. The first question regards the south suburbs.
Yes.
I have a good friend that owns a house in the south suburbs. Her property value is somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000. Taxes of $24,000 a year. A lot of
5% of the value of the home every year.
Exactly. So we know why in some cases people pay higher tax brackets for the schools and different things like that to go to benefit the village. But I'm assuming that the imbalance on the Cook County side of that also plays into their houses as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because if you're going to go out and buy a house and and you can see how much the property, if it's $25,000 a year of property taxes, that is going to affect how much you should pay for that house, right?
So the other question then, I'm sorry, was this. We know the system has been flawed. You're coming in new to change that system.
Yeah.
Should you go in there and you find the data that supports the changes that would be necessary and that would evenly balance that system, how would that reflect to the homeowner and the business owner who's been paying this overpriced amount for so long?
Yeah.
Are they gonna expect immediate reduction in the amount that they pay? Is that gonna, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So you understand what I'm
Right.
asking? How is that gonna be reflected to them? How are they, because this is a difference we need to feel, right?
That's right.
People need to feel this difference, and so that's my question.
Well, so with the caveat that in every person's house, the situation might be a little bit different. So it's hard to say what happens to your specific situation. What we can say is that in general, the south side and the south suburbs are overassessed. And it depends. Sometimes it's 5% overassessed. Sometimes it's 20. Sometimes it's people are paying double what they ought to. It tends to be that the more modest the home, the more overassessed it tends to be. So especially if you have a home that's worth less than $200,000, $150,000, the odds are that that home is going to be overassessed in every neighborhood. The more impacted by the housing crisis the neighborhood was, the more overassessed it will be. The more black the neighborhood, the more overassessed it will be. So, and just to break it down, in Chicago, you know, on the north side, the average, you know, if you look at property taxes divided by the market value of the home, a lot of homes are under 1.5%. On most of the south side, it's over 2%. And that is not supposed to be the way it works. Everyone's supposed to pay the same, right? And yet on the south side, it's 1/3 more per year than on the north side. So that's the order of magnitude. And like I said, for a $150,000 house, that's somewhere between $500 to $1,000 per year more. And we know all of us, families where if you ask them to pay $500 or $1,000 more per year, that's the difference between staying current on your bills and not, right? There are a lot of people there are tens of thousands of people who've been displaced and lost their homes due to this.
Over the system.
That's
Now-
right.
now-
So what's the impact gonna be?
Right.
What we know is that's the magnitude of the overassessment. We need to reassess downtown
Right.
because it's more than 50% underassessed
Right.
downtown. And then we need to, put in better valuation models in the rest of the city. That's gonna take a couple of years, okay, because it takes, that we reassess the county 1/3 every year. But that's the general magnitude of what we're talking about.
Right, and now, is this, when that fix starts to show itself, is that gonna be something that your office can act on unilaterally, or are you gonna have to go to city council and fight the machine to make that happen?
No, we have, as the assessor's office, we have the right to choose the best valuation models that are out there.
Give them a round of applause for that. If we can get around that bureaucracy,
It's an
right?
executive office.
Right.
We don't have to ask anyone's permission in the city or in the county or in the state to do this.
That makes
That's
you a
one
lot
of the
more
best things.
valuable in this room, you know that,
All
right?
right, well, but the other key thing is we have to do it uniformly.
Right.
Our job is to treat everyone, to use all the same data and the same approach for everyone. And what we wanna do is to show our cards, to say, hey, here's how we came up with the numbers. You evaluate us.
Right,
Because right now, they don't tell you how they came up with your assessment, which is outrageous.
Right.
Every other county in the state, they do this. It's actually the law that valuation standards are a public record.
right,
But we're doing everything we can to show the voters that there is a change in culture in this office. So, assuming we win, we have to win the office in November. We come into office in December. That's when we can start doing this work.
right. So I got two more questions for you, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. Just explain a little bit about the difference for our business owners out there, the difference between the commercial tax code versus the residential.
Right.
And
Okay.
whether or not that imbalance exists there in our community as well.
Well, the way Cook County works, this is the only county in the state that does this. There's a different tax rate for businesses and for homes. For $1 of real estate owned, you pay a higher rate. You pay 2.5 times the rate for a business property than you do for a residential property. Now that helps homeowners. That's the reason why the property tax rate on your home in Chicago will tend to be lower than it is in a suburb. But it does fall more heavily on businesses, especially small businesses. And from what we know about this office, and they're still not showing the information, they have very poor information on commercial properties.
Yeah.
It's like they're doing some of this on paper
Right.
or on spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And the Tribune, they did an investigation of how commercial properties are assessed in Cook County. 2/3 of the commercial assessments did not change by $1 since 2010.
Wow.
And this is despite the fact that we're in a radically different economic world in a lot of neighborhoods from where we were
In 2010.
8 years ago or earlier. Amazon has devastated
Right.
lots of retail businesses.
Right.
Brick and mortar businesses in general are a lot weaker. Some neighborhoods have been hit by the housing crisis hard since 2010. So neighborhoods like Chatham and South Shore, they're different from where they were 10 years ago. They're in a different place, but these assessments haven't adjusted. So all the problems in the assessor's office when it comes to bad information, IT being out of date, it's most accentuated in neighborhood businesses. So it is an urgent problem. We're going to try to address it. We need better data and better systems to do that, and we're going to be focused on bringing that into place our first year.
That's a subset of a somewhat larger problem that I see a lot in the laws that we have been lobbying for, like the Liquor Control Act of 1934. A lot of the laws are based on times that were entirely different economically, socially, and such. And you'd be surprised at how much of the system of updating and moving through everything that some of these offices downtown and city, state, and even county government are not really up to speed.
Yeah.
Who remembers when you used to go down to, and it was so great that they got this one together, when you used to have to go to 321 North LaSalle for traffic court. And you'd be in a line that went all the way across the bridge back, you know. But it was the automation of that system that helped them to be able to build that bridge. In some cases, they haven't automated because it seems like they're trying to protect the jobs that sit there. But you said one other thing during our discussion that I want to ask you about, and then we'll take some questions, is that you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you didn't take any money from the people who have benefited before on these tax appeals, right?
That's right. And just so you know, when you get your appeal cut by, when you do an appeal and it gets your assessment cut by a certain amount, these lawyers, they get a third or sometimes 50% of the savings.
Across what line?
Well, if you're assessed at 100,000, that results in an annual bill of $10,000, okay, and they get your assessment cut in half, so that your annual bill is 5, and they're charging 50%. They get $2,500 for doing that.
Right.
And the way it's evolved is that the assessor starts high, and then you go to a lawyer who contributed money to the assessor's campaign, and guess what? You got a money machine right there.
Right.
So we're changing. That's why we didn't take money from these folks.
Right. Okay, well, good. Well, I appreciate that. And matter of fact, give them a round of applause for that, right? Because what we don't want, having you say that, knowing we got a little bit of time between now and November for you to stick to that,
Yeah.
now that means that as we go through this process a year from now, a year and a half from now, we don't expect to see that problem rearing its head again, that the
That's
special interest part of this problem, will have been resolved.
Right.
So that's something that it would be great to
That's
be able
where
to
we
look
can have an
forward to.
immediate impact.
Right,
Is
and then
demonstrating
everything else that happens is process.
that insiders are not going to get special access to this office, and we're not going to be acting in a way that benefits these people who practiced before the office.
Excellent. Do we have any questions from the audience? That's all. Kevin,
You answered my question early on, but maybe I'll repeat it or ask it in a slightly different way. Disclosure, you talked about the models that you're going to be using.
Yeah.
What is going to be the process, if you will, for disclosing to the public? I guess maybe there'll be one model or a couple of models as to how the assessments for businesses and homes, are going to be used. You know, we talked about RW Ventures. So again, the question then becomes is, how transparent will the office be going forward on what models and why they were selected, and then explaining how this model is fairer or better than what had been used in the past. Because I think that's a huge thing that people need to understand. Okay, this is the way it was done, and you lay them side by side. It was done this way, and you had this result. We're doing it this way, and this is the potential result, because as you indicated, it's going to take a couple of years, but this is why we've selected this model versus what had been going on before.
Sure. So unfortunately, we don't know what kind of model they're using now, because they won't tell us.
Okay.
All we know is that it's bad. That however they're coming up with the numbers, it's very inaccurate and it's biased. So what we can do is show, compare the outcomes that are being produced under whatever system they have today with another model.
Right.
You can backtest the model against data in the past. And then the great thing about this office is the proof is in the pudding. We told you last year how much we thought all the properties were worth, and then all the properties that sold this year, you can compare the actual sales prices versus what we guessed they'd be, and then you can then just measure it and say, well, this model did better than that one by this amount. And then the more that we're showing our work, like you do in school, the more that outsiders can scrutinize, saying, hey, that model you're using is really biased against this kind of person, or it's really biased against this neighborhood, and here's why. And we can improve it. But the first step of that is showing your cards. And that's also really important for increasing people's faith in the system, because if you're never accountable for the work that you're doing behind closed doors, you never have to show your work, well guess what? You're not going to be very accountable. People aren't going to, they're not going to trust you. They're going to say, I don't know what goes on in there, but it's bad. And that's the philosophy that we're taking. And so for the example that you mentioned, RW Ventures, this is a model that the assessor's office bought and owns. It was developed for several years ago. They told us they were using it, but they took the Tribune study to show that they were lying. It's a simple model. Everyone can understand it, and you can put in the variables yourself and show it. Now, we don't want you to have a mathematics degree to understand what we're showing, but this stuff is pretty complex. Okay, there could be 20 different variables that come up with how we've come up with your assessment. We're going to try to have it be understandable, but the first thing is just to put the data out there. So the individual homeowner can say, okay, here's how they came up with that number, and I feel better that they're showing how I came up with it, because then there's other people who maybe I don't have the degree to understand this thing, but I know someone out there does, and if they're saying it's better, then okay.
And real quickly, collateral to that, what Dwayne was alluding to earlier, your home was over assessed for 5-10 years, whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been paying more than you should.
Yeah.
And somebody on the Gold Coast was paying a lot less than they should.
Yep.
Okay. For the same period of time. You're talking about equalization. So retroactively, is there any plan? Obviously, you're not going to be writing checks, but is there any plan to try to, if you will, compensate in some way for that inequity that has been going on for some discrete period of time?
Well, the assessor's office can't compensate you for
No,
that.
I understand that.
The other bodies can. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to open up the files, and so then whoever is responsible for this can face the consequences for it. What we're not going to do is we're not going to allow fear of that to stop us from fixing the system going forward. We have to. It's incumbent upon us. The voters are expecting us to fix this, and that is our goal, and we feel a great urgency to do that. And if it causes trouble for what happened in the past, we're not responsible for that. The voters wanted us to make a break, and we'll let those chips fall. But we have to urgently fix this, and we're going to fix it in the best way that we can for everyone going forward.
I think that that is a great thing to follow up on later, to find out who we really need to go after on that issue. I think it's a great thing.
Who can make it?
There's quite a lot of accounting that has to be done, and
the first thing is who can make it right, and then figure out the accounting.
Right.
Yeah, that's right, because it's an incredible amount of money that caused a lot of hardship. We know so many people who are hurt by this.
Yeah. So now we're gonna take Phil Beckham and then Marco.
So, you talked about what your plans are going to be. Can you tell us what, in layman's terms, for a city like Harvey that depended on a heavy industrial and retail for so many decades, all that left, and the homeowners took the burden of the property taxes, and their property taxes are extremely high for the way it is now. Can you give us an example of what that relief in 4 or 5 years ago does for that?
Yeah, so Harvey is one of the most over-assessed parts of the county. Now the trouble for Harvey is that, and by the way, the south suburbs is the most hurt by the system of all the parts of Cook County, because so part of the property taxes that y'all pay in Harvey is for county-wide services for the whole county government, the Forest Preserve, Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. Because they're under assessing downtown, you in Harvey pay more than your fair share, and that is something we can address very quickly. Also in Harvey, like we said, the more modest your home in every part of Cook County, the higher the rate you pay. That's the regressivity problem. We can solve that in Harvey. The thing that we can't solve is that Harvey's housing prices have fallen a lot. You're right, lots of businesses have left. And all of the most property taxes go for schools. So, what's the high school in Harvey? Okay, so Thornton has, everyone who lives within Thornton, they might have to pay $10 million. No one else pays that property tax levy for Thornton. So someone's gonna have to pay the $10 million for Thornton. And that's the thing that the assessor's office cannot change. That's why it's very important that we have a progressive income tax in this state, and have more revenue sharing with schools at the state level. We are number 50 in the United States for state spending on schools, number 50. And so that means communities who care about their kids, who want to spend on education, like in Harvey, you have to make up for it from yourselves. So that's the part that we can't fix. Unfortunately, that's most of the property tax bill in Harvey. So we can address the regressivity of the assessment system for folks in Harvey. What we can't do is fix the regressivity of how we finance schools.
But that's really one of the great parts in this, right? As we start to turn and change in every way that life is functioning for us out here, socially and economically, we have an opportunity now to be more involved in this type of process along the way, right? So the point that you just made, Phil, about Harvey gives us a chance now to start working with the minds in Harvey to say, okay, now that we know that this problem is going to be corrected, how can we work now to start to bring equity back?
Right.
Now, to as a real estate agent, again, the way that comes into play is that Harvey's property taxes, their market would flourish almost immediately, particularly from an investor standpoint, but the property taxes are kind of a hindrance to that, along with some other village requirement stuff.
Yeah.
But they can start to rebuild their real estate economy in a balanced tax system, I think, reasonably quickly. They got the access there. They still got great locations where good businesses can be placed, and they got a pretty an improving nightlife
Yes.
community out there too. So that means that the business tax base should be there. Take that relief off, and then let these houses get redeveloped. Which
That's a very good point, Dwayne. I mean, if we get a Democratic governor and a supermajority, and the progressive income tax amendment is passed, along with revenue sharing, or revenue sharing for schools, it will have a transformative effect on real estate prices in the south suburbs.
Okay. Now, I will only say, as a nonpartisan thinker, that we had a Democratic supermajority and a Democratic governor before, and they were the stewards of the mess that we're talking about here today.
Yes,
So
well,
my ability
the speaker did not have the guts to do that, but the current state of play is different to that. And I hope it will make a difference.
Hopefully it will. Marco?
I have two very specific questions. These gentlemen asked most of the questions, not as specifically as I would, but my first question is, with the system that you mentioned, I observed this as far as the assessors and the appraisers playing the game. The people who participate in that system are voters, and essentially from a black community standpoint are more benefactors from that system, from the whole voting standpoint as it stands. The south side, the south suburbs, historically we have lower vote numbers, but you need that vote in order to beat out the people who are currently participating.
Yeah.
What are you going to do in order to get that vote from those people who are essentially ambivalent and don't feel connected to the vote and don't feel the benefits of the voting process?
Well, that's a good point. That we think that what we're doing has the most benefit for the south suburbs because they've been the most hurt by this system. It's the most overassessed part of the whole county. It is the least benefiting of any part of the whole county from this system. You know, when we're giving billions of dollars to Trump Tower and to skyscraper owners downtown, everyone else has to make up the difference. And it's felt no more acutely than in the south suburbs because the south suburbs, they feel it so much more acutely in a bunch of different ways because they're right next to Indiana and Will County. If you're over-assessing a property in the south suburbs just by 10%, That's the kind of difference that for a commercial property owner will cause them to move into Will County or Indiana instead. And it has a downward spiral. If they're over assessing a shopping mall in Matheson, you know, Matheson has had a lot of stores close.
I'm laughing because you said massive.
Yeah, Matheson. No, Robin Kelly in school. Robin Kelly in school. It's Matheson. But it, you know, when you have an over assessment of these big box stores, like Sam's Club, like Costco, like Carson's, like a Target, and these are all stores that have closed in Matheson. That caused them millions of dollars in sales tax revenues that are lost. And guess how they have to make it up? More property taxes. And when those businesses move out of the malls in Matheson, guess what happens to the neighboring businesses? There's less foot traffic. So they disinvest, and that causes vacancy. And that, in a nutshell, is how the South Suburbs suffers from this system. So addressing overassessment, really urgently important in the South Suburbs, and we're trying to, whenever I have a choice of where I'm going to campaign in this county, I go there, because we think we can make the most of a difference. And you know, we were very fortunate to have the endorsement of 6 members of Congress in this race, which was extraordinary, because we took on the chairman of the party, who was the incumbent. And the people who understood the unfairness of the system best were people who were represented the communities that were affected the most. And that was Danny Davis, Bobby Rush, and Robin Kelly. And Robin Kelly, who represents the South Suburbs, understands this better than anyone. She had talked to the experts in this system before we were even running. And she not only she talked to the experts, she brought them down to talk to all the South Suburban mayors to help persuade them about here's what's going wrong with the system. When we started to run, she didn't automatically endorse us. She said, will you come and you talk to our mayors, and if you can get them, then I'll back you. And you mentioned Bob Weisbord. She brought Bob Weisbord to talk down in forums down there.
At Prairie State College, that's
right,
where it was.
and you went to that.
Yep.
You went to that, Kevin. So she's the congresswoman from the 2nd District. I'm a huge fan. And whenever there's a chance to talk to folks in the South Suburbs, we're down there because people are starting to get it.
Yeah, and
I hope that answered your question.
A little bit.
Oh, yeah,
So my second question is, with the population trend of Illinois, it's a net outflow.
Yes.
Losing people daily. So I guess my question is, can you give us any tangible, or for this crowd, something to say, okay, this is the plan to fill that hole, because we're paying the same amount or more taxes with less people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I mean, me personally, I don't have a lot of faith in Chicago, Cook County, Illinois,
Yes.
improving, because it's just been terrible for so long.
Right.
So what, for example, if you can give us one example or maybe a broad understanding of what you plan to do that will address the problem of paying taxes, plugging holes with less people.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And by the way, I understand this. I mentioned I went to Kenwood in the class of '89. I cannot tell you how many of my classmates are living in Atlanta right now, and it's more and more every year. It started, people left Hyde Park and they went to the South Suburbs, but then people are leaving the county or the state. So you're right. So here's what we can do tangibly, okay? So if downtown is under-assessed by more than 50%, that's like $1 billion per year in property taxes that they are underpaying, that everyone else has to make up the difference for. So that's about $300 million a year from the south side that they're overpaying by. So if we just fix that problem downtown, that alone can make a substantial difference for people on the south side. Couple $100 per home, if you average it out across the, and that will take a couple of years because we have to collect enough data to reassess downtown. We can put in a new model that eliminates the regressivity of the system. The regressivity, again, is the more modest your home in every neighborhood, the higher the rate you pay. We run a better model. We have the right to put that in. We don't have to ask anyone's permission to do that, but we do have to have enough data to meet the legal standards that everyone's treated fairly. That's also something that can, for a $150,000 home, could be about $100, $150 on the south side. So that's the magnitude of difference that we can make. So it's not a huge amount, but it's enough that, again, if you're talking about $500 per year per home, more than you should be paying, that's enough to drive tens of thousands of people per year out, right? Across. So we fix that, we think we can make a difference. Now the other big game changer when it comes to people getting pushed out is, like I said, getting progressive income taxes in this state. That is a harder push. It goes in Springfield, but it's very important because the tax burden overall in Illinois is actually not that big because we have low income taxes here. But for the average person, it's crushing because our property taxes in Illinois are high. The average person who owns a house feels it. You lose your job, do you pay less property taxes? No. But the wealth is more and more going to the top 1%. The top 1% of filers, of tax filers in Illinois pays 25% of the income taxes today, even though we don't have a progressive income tax. If we had one, that would have a lot of relief on the average person on the property tax side. So that's something that's very important for us to do so that we don't have a crushing tax burden for the average person in Illinois, while people are living comfortably making $1 million per year. That when their incomes are growing as much as they are, it's not captured in the property tax system, and it would be in the income tax system. So that's something that's very important. That's the biggest issue that's at stake in the gubernatorial election in November. So please vote. I don't want to tell you how to vote. Make up your mind yourselves. But for what you're talking about, the things that drive people out of the state, it's how we fund our government that does that. And if we don't tax incomes enough and localities have to look to property taxes as a result, that's the kind of thing that drives people out. So we should, and the last thing I'd like to close on is, California, they used to have the same despair about their fiscal situation as we do here. Like 10 years ago in California, they were talking about, got deficits forever, pensions, it's a structural deficit, you can't fix it. Well, they adopted a more progressive income tax thanks to their governor, Jerry Brown, and they don't have deficits anymore in California. The top 1% of filers, they pay more than half of income taxes there. But they've got an entrepreneurial economy, and they don't have a fiscal problem anymore. That's the kind of solutions we should at least have the opportunity to have in Illinois.
I think we definitely admit the issue about people moving is about a lot more than taxes, but but what I would encourage you to do is to make sure that as you begin to make these changes, that the public stays well informed of that, because it takes away that lack of hope that someone might have that it won't get better.
Yes.
People start to see that the system is improving,
Right.
then they'll go. So we're gonna go with the Hyde Park Herald, then Ashad and Otis.
Sir, the Aaron Geiger of the Herald. Will you go to Springfield and lobby for these changes if Pritzker wins, if the Democrats carry the legislature and that kind of thing? Do you think that you have any clout to try to advocate for a progressive income tax structure in the state legislature?
Yeah, so we're campaigning for the ticket right now precisely for that reason, because we know progressive income taxes are the key to providing relief on property taxes, especially in communities that have been most impacted by the housing crisis. So yes, we'll do that. The other things we're going to do in Springfield are we want to advocate for Automatic renewal of the seniors exemption. Right now, if you're a senior, you're entitled to an exemption, but you have to recertify that you're still over 65 every year.
You don't get younger.
And it's an incredible amount of work. You have to send in a form. Hundreds of thousands of people have to send in this form every year. And then you think of all the people in the assessor's office who could be working on other stuff. They got to process these forms. And then there are about 100,000 people who forget to send in the form, and it costs them thousands of dollars per year. We should have automatic renewal of this. Like, we know it is within the capability of humanity to know, for the computer at the clerk's office that knows when you're alive, to talk to the computer at the assessor's office, so that we can do this seamlessly. You know, my dad, he's 80 years old. He's very financially astute. He taught me all that I learned about investing. He forgot to file his seniors exemption this year because he had other things going on. He's 80 years old. He can't go to the assessor's office. So this is the kind of thing that we can do to solve things. The other thing that we want to do in Springfield is have better data collection rules. So those are the things. But we're absolutely standing up for progressive income taxation. I think I'll be a more credible voice for that than Joe Barrios was. Joe Barrios couldn't really credibly go down to Springfield and convince anybody of the need for this.
My question is, do you have any thoughts on your interaction? I don't want to say you'll receive or foresee any resistance, but what are your ideas as it relates to your interaction with the Treasurer's office?
Mm-hmm.
Question was, what is his ideas as it relates to his interaction with the Treasurer's office?
Yes, so just so you know, the treasurer is the person to whom you actually pay. You send in your property tax bill. You don't send it to the assessor. The assessor is determining the value of your home, and then the treasurer sends out a bill saying, based on what the assessor it's concluded the value of your home is, this is how much your property tax bill is, and you send the check into the treasurer. The treasurer is very important because if you're delinquent on your property tax bill, there's a whole other industry of people that will buy your tax debt, and then you have to buy it back from them, and it can be at a very high interest rate. It's kind of a predatory industry. We can't control that, but what we can control is not having overassessment so people aren't put in that situation unnecessarily. So we want to work with the treasurer to, we want to do our work, stick to our knitting, make assessments fairer and more accurate so that fewer people are put in that position. And then we want to work with the treasurer as much as we can to notify people when they are getting delinquent that, hey, you need to take care of this, otherwise someone's going to buy your debt. So part of our transparency efforts is to make people understand their assessment better, to have that information available for them. And if they're used to checking it, then hopefully we hope that they will pay their bill on time.
See, because one of my questions was about the homestead exemption for the seniors that you referenced earlier.
Yeah.
And what happened this year with many of our seniors is that, of course, they were missing. We got the letter or the listing from the treasurer's office.
Yeah.
We reached out to them, set something up so that they can come in and fill it out with an attorney that said that he would do it for them free of charge or whatever.
Okay.
But it would seem to be an extra step that we had to go through in order to do that, and they weren't necessarily helpful. They were saying, yeah, call the assessors or this, that, and the other. But I want to know if there's a way to actually, is there a step that can be removed from there? You mentioned already the automatic.
Well, here's how you do it.
Yeah.
You pass the law that we want to have passed in Springfield, then the computer says, oh, this person's still alive,
Do it.
so they should still get their exemption. And you don't have to send in anything or do anything. And if you die, and if you die, then you have to reapply. Whoever is owning that house the next year has to reapply for the exemption. That should be the way it works. We can do this.
Otis, next question?
Yeah.
I guess I'm stand-in for the next 5 minutes. Dwayne had important real estate.
You said something that really resonated with me because I'm a California resident. Born and raised here in Illinois, Chicago, but I've been living there the last 18 years or so. One of the things that we've done, we do have a higher income tax. I noticed when you talked about the assessment a lot. Well, the assessment office, you guys are really just a messenger for the most part.
Yeah.
And what I'm interested in is, we have something there. I live in Santa Clara County, what they call Silicon
Okay.
Valley. So
Silicon Valley. Yeah.
And our property tax rate is flat. It's
Right.
approximately 1.15%.
Yeah.
So we're not paying more than $15,000 for, $1 million, whatever property, right?
Depends on when you bought your home.
Exactly, and we're grandfathered in. So if you
Right.
bought a house in the '70s
Yeah.
that was $40,000 then, you're still only paying 1.135 or whatever percent on that property. And I noticed since I've been here, like being out in Madison, you're seeing $150,000 houses, $200,000 houses with $15,000-$20,000 property taxes. I've never seen that where
Yeah.
the property tax is actually more than your mortgage. And
Yeah.
it confused the heck out of me. And I'm a veteran. I own a mortgage, a real estate company in the valley, the whole thing, and this just blew me away.
Yeah.
So what I'm noticing is when you come across your assessment, when you talk about it, there was nothing that let me know that the percentage, the tax rates were even across the board. So even though things are being misassessed, there's still a difference in what they're being charged in property tax. But even outside of that, as the assessor's office fixes that, my concern is there's still a misappropriation of funds. So you can talk about the $10
Yes.
million that's going to Thornton,
Right.
or that's supposed to,
Right.
because I'm looking at the Madison area, I
Yeah.
work with the mayor's and manager's office outside, all in the south suburbs,
Okay.
46 or whatever municipalities, and what I'm finding is that they're paying all those taxes, the streets suck, the schools aren't that good, so I don't understand, where's this $10 million?
Well, I'll tell you, a lot of the south suburban municipalities were mismanaged. Because what they do is every unit of government says this is our budget, and then that determines the levy. Well, if you guys have ever done budgeting, if you could design your own budget, do you think that it would be, efficient or not?
But what I found is it's more of a collaborative environment,
Yeah.
so when we have the entire county engaged,
Yeah.
and everybody's paying the same tax rate, what happens is, yes, you're broken up into your districts or your counties and things
Yeah.
like that. But the money seems to be appropriately managed
Yeah.
in our county.
Mhm.
And here,
Yes.
everything seems to be,
Well,
lopsided.
you're right. You're right. Our Cook County government has done a pretty good job managing their budget. A lot of the municipalities and some of the school districts, especially in the south suburbs, have not done a good job of managing those budgets. And it's up to the voters to ask hard questions about why.
Yeah. Where's the money?
Where did you come up with this contract? Why did you hire this person? So holding people, especially people on school boards, accountable for how they're spending money is very important to determining what happens with your property tax bill. Unfortunately, the assessor's office does not control how these folks come up with their levies. We just determine your share of the bill. So we're trying to eliminate the unfairness in how your share of the bill has been determined, but it's the taxing bodies that are driving the unfairness in the total size of the levy.
Right, one last thing, you talk about the assessor's office. What does that, who makes up the assessor's office? And the reason I ask
Yeah,
is
good
because
question.
being in, a lot of these people are in mortgage and real estate
Yeah.
things, and you can get comps, we
Yeah.
have appraisers that's doing all the work, finding out these properties for you, and it seems so hard to come up with a simple formula within the assessor's office. It should be pretty transparent, it shouldn't be rocket science for us to really
Right.
understand it.
Yeah.
Just like an appraiser can come and tell you, this is what they're selling for, and I know you have a formula as far as coming up with that, but
Yeah, I mean, all the folks who are brokers or in the real estate business here, if I told you we got a 3-bedroom ranch for sale in Chatham,
right.
how much would you charge for it? People probably have a pretty good idea how much you could sell it for, right? That's the assessor's job. So there are about 280 people in the assessor's office.
Any of them appraisers?
Some of them have that kind of experience. See, I'm not assessor yet, so I still have to meet a lot of these people. We've met some individuals behind the scenes, but it's some people who are in IT, some people who are lawyers, but the bulk of what the assessor's office does is analysts who are out there gathering data and coming up with these values, working with the IT systems, trying to gather better data. Some of the folks who work in the office are supposed to be out there making sure that that 1-bedroom house really is a 1-bedroom house and not a 5-bedroom house. Right. So every person who works in that office is going to be very important to improving, driving the improvements that we want to bring in. 280 people is not a lot of people for a county with 1.8 million properties. Right? This is the second biggest county in the country. So it's a lot of work. The work that they do is very important. We know they want to be professionally led. And the good thing is that we're in the middle of a data revolution right now, where computing power is getting cheaper. There's more and more data out there, the better and better models. We can look to what other assessors' offices in the rest of the U.S. do to find best practices, and that's what we're doing now.
Ryan, and then Java and Kevin to wrap it up.
One quick question and another one. You said you have the autonomy to decide the process. Is there any challenge or appeals process within Cook County government where another executive branch would come in and challenge the process you make?
No. Well, so here's what happens: is we can come up with your assessment, and you can appeal it to us.
Right.
And if you don't like what we have, whatever our assessment has been, you can actually appeal it to another body, which is called the Board of Review.
Right. I meant more.
And if you don't like what they do, you can appeal it to the courts.
More on like just the model itself, because you said there's multiple ones. Okay,
we have the right to determine our model, but the legal standard is of uniformity. We cannot single people out for different treatment from others. So we have to come up with standards that apply to everyone. That's the one constraint that we have on our models. That everyone be treated fairly. So much as I would like to say, Donald Trump, you owe $1 billion, everyone else here owes nothing, I can't do that.
Yeah. And second question, do you have a stance on the vacant property tax exemption? That's levied, is it at state level that they get?
Well, this is a very good point. Actually, there's not an official exemption for vacancy. It's all been discretionary at the assessor's office, where someone has a building, it's vacant, and they'll just knock down the assessment a lot. And what that does is that encourages vacancy, and that really hurts communities, right? Like if you, I don't know if any of you guys own a store. If half of the stores around you were vacant, it would hurt your business, right? But fewer people would walk by. There'd be less eyes, and security would be worse. The whole thing. So we don't want to encourage vacancy. The other thing that vacancy does is it reduces sales taxes. When you do that, well, guess what? Property taxes go up for everyone else, and people in the neighborhood want to have their spaces be used. So. We are and the principle that you're supposed to use is not is the property vacant or not. You're supposed to say, here's what the market level of vacancy is, and we're going to apply that market level of vacancy to every commercial property in the area, so that we're not incentivizing vacancy. And that will be our policy.
Very good question, Java.
The system that has protected and nourished these inequities is a living, breathing organism with many links and many moving pieces. So how does one person come up against self-preservation of that organism?
You're right. So the power that we have in the office is to come up with the best models that are available, and so that's a very big deal, having the power to do that.
Changing the culture.
Right.
Because it's a culture issue.
Right. So the culture issue is very important. It's not only the culture within the office, but it's also the culture of everyone who lives in the county. Because if everyone assumes that the system is rigged and it's not working, then people will hire these lawyers, and everyone will feel like they have to appeal, or lots of people will feel like they have to appeal, and some people, appealing is basically you're helping one group at the expense of everyone else who doesn't appeal. We have way too many appeals in Cook County, so what we need to do to change the culture is to convince people that, hey, the guys who are in the assessor's office now, they're trying to get it right the first time, and they're taking out the favoritism, they're taking out the error, they're taking out the bias. So that's what we can take care of. And the other thing we can take care of is take care of perceptions that some people have the inside track to better outcomes. That's why we're not taking money from property tax appeals lawyers or that industry. Because it's not only because we don't think it's right, we think it's a smart thing to do because we want to show to people in the county that, hey, these guys aren't gonna have the inside track. He's not taking campaign donations from them. And he's not gonna give them special favors. And he's not gonna keep the data secret. He's putting the cards out on the table for everyone to see for how they came up with their assessment. So the cultural change is very important within the office, but then for everyone else, to have people believe that we're trying to make it fairer. Now there are entrenched interests that we're taking on. We're taking on an entrenched property tax appeals industry. We're taking on people who've gotten these favors. A lot of downtown building owners might feel like, hey, I kind of like the current system. But not all of them do.
They believe in, is it because they believe in being fair about it, or because the money is not adding up? They're not getting as much favor as the next guy.
Well, more and more people are realizing that, well, I might get a better deal out of the system, but I know it's corrupt, and I suspect that this is a race to the bottom, that someone else is going to cut even more corners and get an even better deal, and that makes us all worse off. Why not get it right the first time? So if I'm a building owner downtown, they think, well, I would just like to have more certainty about my build now, and then so I can plan around it. And as long as I know that it's fair and that everyone is getting the same deal, I can live with that, and then I don't have to pay all these other guys to get me a better deal. That's money out of my pocket. That's what we're trying to convince people of. But it's going to take a couple of years to convince people of this.
I'm really, really excited about this, in part because it's very rare that I've had an occasion where I could deal with a political leader who is the office that you're going after is one, like you said, it's an executive office. So it's very clear cut. You're either going to do it or you're not.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of whether or not you could convince a bunch of other people to get on board. It's either going to do it or not. So if we're here 3-4 years from now when you run it again and it's not done, guess what?
Yeah.
We're going to be to see you.
You'll be able to measure it.
We're going to bring all the Kenwood, 89, and all the Hyde Park to come against you. But seriously though, it's good to know that. And my encouragement to everyone here is to take what you learned tonight. Take what you saw, because I saw and I learned quite a bit. But what I saw that really stood out to me is this. Now that the system, and once the system starts to get more fair, we have an opportunity now to speak to other entities about making good on the damage that they did with the system that they had in place.
Yeah.
One of the things we have to learn about politically is where one office ends and where another one begins, like the distinction made between the treasurer and the assessor and all these other departments. So now that we know what your office is, the SBAC, we're always going to be a nonpartisan partner, if you will, in working to make sure that it's right from the business owner standpoint, but we also are smart enough to understand the correlation between the homeowner and the business. If he's got more money in his pocket, that's more money he can spend on the Dwayne Hurst Masterclass. Well, good to be here, by the way. But, right, exactly, get that 10% off. So that's what we need. So we thank you for that. I think Kevin is going to have one more question, and then we're going to wrap everything up.
Okay.
Kevin?
We talked about data and that sort of thing. And one of the things I guess that I'm concerned about is, one, the data is already out there in private companies. A company called CoStar. You ever heard of it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. CoStar. Okay.
Our transition team has a subscription.
You don't have to
already
reinvent the wheel in terms of getting that data. They'll sell it to you. Okay. So that's an relatively easy fix in terms of acquiring that data. And you talked about best practices, seeing what other people do. That's a very sensible thing. Again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So in terms of spending money to get this thing fixed, it doesn't require a lot of money. It will require some, but not a lot.
That's
And then the last thing, this is more of a statement than anything else. You talked about the impact of taxes and the way they affect businesses. Several years ago, I was at a meeting up north at a Republican thing. I'm an independent conservative, okay? But anyway, what this gentleman said was he was considering building a factory here in Illinois, okay? And he was trying to decide between Illinois and Indiana. And what he did was he said, I'm a University of Chicago MBA, I can read a balance sheet. And what he did was he did a calculation as to what it would cost to build a factory in Illinois versus Indiana. It was cheaper to build it in Illinois, but he said he was looking down the road, and he said that at some point, given the structural problems that Illinois was having, he said they're gonna come after the property owners, exactly what you're saying in terms of filling that gap. And so he built it in Indiana, even though from day one it cost him more.
Yep.
In future years, he was looking at what it would cost.
Yeah, because he knows that that is not, in Indiana, that's not their style, to tax you to death. That's why when we live off that border, we jump across that border as much as we can to get our tools and fuels from gas to a little bit of everything else and groceries, because they're not taxing the hell out of it.
And Brad Thor, the author, he said he left Illinois for that very reason too. He called himself a tax refugee.
Well, you have that, and I hope that, that now, here's a question, I don't know if anybody asked that tonight. You do not, do you have the authority to actually raise the taxes?
No.
Okay, good. All right.
That's
We don't want to
municipalities.
but we know who to, and I say that's good so that we can stay on top of the people who are really responsible.
That's right.
So if they went and say, okay, well now the property taxes are even and it's all different, now we got to raise it because we lost money because we wasn't stealing as much.
Yeah.
Then people, but I don't want people to unfairly blame you for that if that's
Yeah.
the case, because trust me, that's
Right.
where your kickback is going to be. Once that, anytime somebody's been stealing money that long, they view the end of that theft as a loss, and so they start to having to adjust to that loss by adding more to it to start to bring that revenue back to the
Right,
table.
so in the city, it's the mayor. If you're in the suburbs, first look at your school district and then look at your local mayor. Those
Yeah.
are the two.
Well, I really, really thank you for coming out tonight. Give them a round of applause. Thank you. Just keep in mind that the SBAC as an advocacy organization is here, and I invite you to engage with everyone that's here. We are on Facebook Live. Say hi to everybody on Facebook Live. All right, this is him. Right. So, again, thank you all for coming tonight. We'll be here again on the third Wednesday in the month of August, same time, same channel. And again, make sure you talk to Alicia or Sharisa about information regarding the master class and other things that'll be coming up. Thanking you all. Again,
Thank you.
and tonight, if you're up at 11 o'clock, I do the 11th hour program live on Facebook and Instagram. It's just something we do to inform late night entrepreneurs if you're up working. Even though I've had a long day, executive meeting this morning and here tonight, I'll be up and on that at 11 o'clock tonight. So make sure you tune in. Thank you.